Okay, so we are on chapter 2 of Makkot. We are on Mishnah number 6, and I should point out that this will be our last class of September, because next week is the day after Rosh Hashanah, and I can promise you that I am not going to be up at 7 o'clock at night on that day. I will have, sorry, that I don't have any of the classes, and then the following week is Yom Kippur, and we're not going to be doing Mishnah on Yom Kippur. Sorry. You're welcome to bring your Mishnah, and you can read it during, but there's other things to think about. Exactly. And then the following week we have a special program with Sisterhood in the Sukkah. So the next 3 weeks, this is high holidays. It happens, and they're all following right at this time of the year. I mean, right on that time of the week. So
that's where we go back and do intensely what we were reading.
Well, you know, I think what we're going to find, I'm sure we're going to finish chapter 2 tonight. I've got chapter 3 ready to go as well. But the beginning of chapter 3, I'm not going to expect you to memorize. And you'll see why I say that once we get there. It's a very, very long set of lists. But we'll get to the meat of chapter 3 probably in the beginning of October. But that'll give you a little time to come to grips. Okay, so let's whip through this. Makkot, flogging, whipping. Let's whip through this. All right, you should know I'm saving my good jokes for my sermons.
Yeah, but you forget that we have only one gringo here.
Yeah.
I can go to your jokes, okay, linguistic jokes.
But see, that's the thing. It's a bilingual joke, right? You need Anglit and Ivrit. Good evening. There should be an extra copy of the packet there next to Natan. All right. So, would you like to start us off?
I guess I say it.
Okay.
Rabbi Yosef ben Bar Yehuda says, initially a slayer is sent in advance to one of the cities of refuge, whether he had slain in error or with intent, and then the court sends and brings him out.
All right. So this is handling a very real problem, which is, let's imagine that there is a murder, a death that takes place, and you can tell it's a violent death. It's not just someone dropping because of a heart attack. And there's this worry that the person who is accused of doing it will be killed by one of the relatives. So everybody, even if we think it might have been on purpose, gets sent to the city of refuge, right? That's like jail in the modern world, right? A jail is where you go when you're waiting for your trial. So everybody would go there, and then when it's ready for the trial, when you've got the witnesses and everybody ready for the court case, you bring them back to the court and you do the court. Make sense?
And how do you know the person will not run away?
What do you mean run away?
From the city.
They're in the city of refuge. They're being watched. Plus, what happens if you run away? The family will kill you.
If they find you.
So
it's a risk because you cannot watch or it's not a jail.
Roll your mind back 2,000, 3,000 years ago. Right? You don't live in Orlando with hundreds of thousands of people. You don't even live with tens of thousands of people for most of the land of Israel. It's not so easy to just disappear. If you want to run away to a whole new country, maybe you can do that, right? But that is not always so easy. So it wasn't quite the same. But yes, if a person was suspected of having done this intentionally, they would be watched. There was a jail for keeping people until the trial. But even if there weren't, I mean, if you're like an accidental, like what we're going to get to, we're going to see, right? The accidental manslaughter has to live in that city, even if it's just an accident, until the high priest dies. You might think, well, why doesn't he run away? Well, because if he runs away, A, the family can kill him, and B, it's hard to run away.
So they had jails at the time?
Yes, but remember, jails and prisons are two different things. Right? A jail is someplace temporary, just for a little while. Prison is where your punishment is as having your freedom taken away.
So no prison.
No prisons, but they had jails.
So what are the policy for the jail in a Jewish law? Like, for example, which kind of restriction you are allowed, because the person in jail is not still guilty.
No, they're not.
but how much freedom has, what were the conditions?
Not really.
Rules in the jail.
You had to stay in the jail until you had your trial, but the trials were not months and months and months later, right? The trial would be like a few days later. So it wasn't like you were taken away from your family for 3 years before they had your case. So they had a very different relationship with how they punish people, which is one of the things that when we get to the end of chapter 3, and we're talking about flogging, I really would like us to discuss of what is the worst punishment, flogging someone or putting them in a jail for 5 years, or prison for 5 years, taking away someone's freedom, their job, from their family, or hitting them 39 times on the back with a piece of leather. It's something we'll discuss when we get to chapter 3.
I thought jail was local and prison was federal.
No, there are state prisons and there are federal prisons. If you break a state law, you'll go to a state prison. If you break a federal law, you'll go to a federal prison. So if you, for example, if you steal from the federal government, then you've broken a federal law and they'll probably prosecute you and put you into a federal prison. If you steal from the local government, then they'll put you in a state prison. But jails are usually even more local because they like to keep people close to be ready for their trials. You're not going to send somebody, to Pensacola if their trial is in Miami. You keep them local. You keep them local because they're not supposed to be there forever. Now, does America have a system where we end up putting people forever even before their trial? Yeah, that's an American thing, but that wasn't the case back then.
When the president go to the city,
right, for refuge, right?
He go by himself or he go with somebody?
So that was, we talked a little bit last week. They would be escorted, but technically, when they're going before the trial, when they're running away the first time, technically, if somebody finds them, they can kill them. But that is not what the rabbis want to happen. They want there to be a trial. And that means that they have people with them who will try to explain, don't attack them, we need to have a trial, da 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 da. So that's the way the rabbis try to prevent people from taking vengeance. They want it to be justice instead. And if you don't have a trial, you don't really have justice guaranteed. All right, onward.
Whoever was found guilty of capital crime with court had executed. Whoever was found not guilty of a capital, they acquitted.
All right, so the guy there with the smoking gun, he goes bang. You catch him, you take him to the city, you get the trial together, you bring him back to the trial, you find out, yep, there were witnesses, all the warnings, everything we talked about when we did Sanhedrin. He's guilty, he is executed. Or you take him out and you say, nope, he didn't actually do it, someone else shot him, his gun was just a toy, it wasn't a real gun, whatever the case was, he's free to go. Right? It's a trial, and you get an answer.
So whoever was found liable to banishment, they restored to his place of refuge, as it says, and the congregation shall restore him to the city of refuge to which he fled.
Right, from Numbers 35, if you find out the guy actually isn't a murderer, but he is a manslaughter from the negligent category, remember that's what the beginning of chapter 2 was all about, then you put him back into the city, and that's where he's going to stay. Right, so it's not prison, but it's also not freedom. Right, so he's not sitting there behind bars, but as we'll see, he has to stay inside the city limits. And he has to stay there for a random amount of time, which is what the next few Mishnayot are going to answer for us.
So, all the same are the deaths of the high priests who have been anointed with the anointing oil. All
right, so this is answering a question that you probably haven't asked yet, which is, what kind of Kohen Gadol, what kind of high priest has to die to set him free? And you might think, well, every high priest is the same, right?
No, so the high.
There's only one Kohen Gadol category, but there have been different types of Kohanim Gadolim at different times. And there are people who were a Kohen Gadol who are no longer the Kohen Gadol, but they're still alive. So we're going to talk about those categories as we go through. So first, we have those that were anointed with the anointing oil, right? From Aaron all the way through, I believe it was until about Josiah. This was the standard. which was you had the special oil that you used and you put it on the high priest and you said, now you are the Kohen Gadol. And if you didn't do that, then they weren't the Kohen Gadol. After Josiah, or right at Josiah, they lost the oil. They couldn't do that anointing anymore. So instead, they used special garments to mark who was the Kohen Gadol.
Why they couldn't do it?
They didn't have it anymore. They lost the formula. Yep.
They couldn't reproduce or do a different
Hey,
formula.
Do a different formula? The Torah doesn't give us options for substitutes.
Well, we have
How long-
conservative movement here. Maybe it's something
How long? The Kohanim were not known for being very
flexible.
flexible. Yes. How long has it taken us to find Techelet again? Right, losing formulas, the blue on the talit.
But they found it.
Yes, after 2,000 years. Right, so maybe 2,000 years we'll eventually find
They
the
are
oil.
working with Paradumado also now.
Oh, that yes, that we actually know what it looks like.
They actually found the color?
The blue, yeah. Well, not everybody agrees, but almost everybody does.
How long ago was this?
Like a decade or more. My talit has techelet on it. If you've never looked at my tzitzit.
Ooh.
Oops, excuse me. I don't know
Less
who.
than 20 years.
Something like that. Excuse me. Okay.
Do you have your tallit on you? Or like not on you wearing
No.
but in the office?
Yeah, no, it's in the sanctuary. You've seen it if you come on Shabbat. Look at the corners next time when I'm walking around with the Torah. Keep your eyes on the corners. All right, so you have the oil, you have the garments.
Or had worn many garments, or had retired from his office, all make possible the return.
Right. Or sometimes some Kohanim will no longer be able to be a Kohen Gadol, and they have to retire. But he still was a Kohen Gadol. So if any one of these three people die, then everybody who is currently in one of these cities goes free. Right? So if the you didn't have all three at once, right? So if the early type of Kohen was gone, if the mid type of Kohen was gone, or if one of the mid types who had retired was gone, or early type who had retired was gone, if they die, you go free. Make sense? It doesn't have to be only the current guy at the altar on Yom Kippur. It could be the guy who was doing the job before him, but who had now become disqualified and couldn't do it anymore. If he dies, and we might assume that he might be older, then that's okay too.
But that's kind of it's good but bad at the same time, because that means someone will be trying to plan to get rid of them to get let go.
Hold on till we get to part 3.
So that's what they would think. What must be a natural death, or what's happening? There's an accident.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait till we get to part 3.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
So we're at
Rabbi 2a, yeah.
Rabbi Judas says also the death of the priests who have been anointed for war is possible with the return of the master.
All right, so before we go out to war, to Milchama, there was a special priest who had to be appointed for war, and he had to make a special speech and things like that. And Rabbi Yehuda says if he dies, he also counts as a Kohen Gadol. The halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda. He doesn't actually count in the end. So the Talmud goes into more detail for that, but he doesn't count. So only one of the ones that were mentioned in the beginning of part 2. Midrashically, he doesn't fit, according to the rabbis, from the verse. That his appointment isn't appropriate as being one of the 3 Kohen Gadol. And so he's not, his death is not sufficient to release the manslaughter.
Because it's not a Kohen Gadol for religious purpose, but for military, for a different purpose. No ceremonial.
Maybe, but it's the way they read the verse. They don't believe that it lines up. But that's, if you want to know more, gotta have to read the Talmud. Sorry. Now we get to the part that everyone was just thinking.
Therefore, the mothers of high priests provide food and clothing for them in exile, that they might not pray to their son's death.
Okay, so you can imagine, my son, the Kohen Gadol, I'm so happy my son became the Kohen Gadol, such nachas. But I now know that every manslaughter in every city of refuge is going, God, please kill the Kohen Gadol. Because as soon as he dies, he's free. So me, being the good parent, I'm going to give the guy clothes and food. I'm going to take care of them because I know that
Right.
make them satisfied with where they are, right? Because I know that their mind will be bent towards the death of my son if I don't try to make their life comfortable, right? And there's really actually, well, there's so much to say about this one little sentence, but first thing to say, there is a beautiful notion here that those people that are in prison or in exile should still be of concern to us, right? We shouldn't ignore them. We shouldn't treat them badly.
Still members of the community.
They're still members of the community, and in fact, we should care what they think because their prayers could kill the Kohen Gadol, which comes to point number 2, which is their prayers could kill the Kohen Gadol. What?
Could enter their prayers.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if I'm praying, God, please kill the Kohen Gadol, you think God's going to answer my prayer?
Not only that,
Is that a good prayer?
God is answering
Depends on
everyone, the good and the bad people.
Well, you think God will, if you think you think if I'm praying for the death of a righteous person, God's going to say, well, since you asked so nicely, there'd be no murder if we could kill people with prayer, right? I'd just say, oh, God, my neighbor who keeps stealing my newspaper, please kill. I mean, if God would answer that kind of prayer, what would it say about God? It would be a scary world. And it makes us wonder then, why are the mothers of the Kohanim worried that the prayers of these people might be answered? And the answer that the Talmud gives is because did the Kohen Gadol do enough to try and avoid these types of accidents in his community? Right? Or was the Kohen Gadol concerned? Did he pray, to prevent accidents? Because remember, we're talking about accidental deaths here. So was he worried, about what happens if someone's out and they're cutting wood and someone gets killed? That would be terrible. When their prayers, was the Kohen Gadol thinking about the whole nation, all of the nation? And the argument here is that maybe he wasn't. And if he wasn't really thinking about all of the nation, then maybe he is also partly responsible for the death. And therefore, when the manslaughterer prays for the Kohen Gadol to die early, maybe God will listen and allow the manslaughterer to go free. So, best to make sure we take care of the manslaughterer in the exile, and also best for the Kohen Gadol to actually care about everybody in the nation and think about everybody in the nation. So yeah, one little sentence, but it binds the whole community together in just so many ways.
But my question now is about the mother, because on the Talmud they talk about that. But what kind of food? Because she allowed to eat terumah, right?
You mean the Kohen Gadol mother? Yes.
The Kohen Gadol mother. That's what they.
Right, because she has to be married to a Kohen.
But that's why she gave it to the.
No. She doesn't have to only give truma. Right, I mean truma, which was the special gift that was given to the Kohen Gadol that had to be eaten when you were ritually pure. That wasn't the only food they ate. They were still allowed to eat a hamburger, just regular food. But they could only eat only they could eat truma. So she could give other food or just buy food for them, even if it wasn't her own. She could provide it for them. So that's not an issue. Okay. And now some very interesting technicalities.
So, if the high priest died at the conclusion of the trial, Slayer does not go into banishment.
All right, so you have the trial, and we find the person was guilty of negligent manslaughter, bang the gavel, and then we hear the high priest is dead. The guy hasn't even left the courtroom yet to go into exile. Like the next minute, he dies.
Maybe it's a sign from God that the rabbi was incorrect.
Lo b'shamayim hi. Right? The signs, we don't look for heaven. That's in this week's parasha. Lo b'shamayim hi. Right? We don't look for signs for our judges. We look for actual laws and logic and thinking. So if this happens, says the Mishnah, because he was already convicted and now the death has happened, even though he didn't reach the city, he can go free. He's free, right? So the manslaughterer, he served his time. Even if it was only 1 minute between the sentence and the death and now his freedom, he served his time. Is it? So imagine the Kohen Gadol doesn't die for 100 years. right? I
But
mean,
there are many Kohen Gadol.
well, there's definitely the option to have more than one alive at a time. Not always, but it's possible, right? But you could have an old Kohen Gadol die, and then you are convicted the next day, and the young Kohen Gadol lives for another 50 years. Is that fair? Just because, you know, a bit of wood killed someone by accident? Well, according to the Torah, yes. All right, so if we're willing to accept the long sentence, we have to be willing to accept a short sentence. That's what it means to have it be dependent on this situation that ties the person into the broader community. But
if he died before the trial was concluded, another high priest was appointed instead. The trial was then concluded. The slayer returns home from refuge only after the latter's death.
right, so if the situation I just gave, right, the old guy dies, the new guy's appointed, and then you're sentenced, then you're waiting until the new guy dies. Right? Even though the Kohen Gadol who was alive when you committed the murder is dead, you don't go free. I should say manslaughter. Murderers don't go free. Good? All right, 2-7. Now we're going to have other questions and problems you probably never thought about. Part 1. We're just going around, or do we get a volunteer? All right, people are allowed to say no if they don't want to. Katie, you okay reading? So we're on 2-7, beginning where it says Mishnah 7.
Mishnah 7. If the trial was concluded when there was no high priest in office, or if one kills a high priest or a high priest that kills, in these cases, a manslayer can never come away from that place of refuge.
All right, so this is like you're caught in the gap, right? You're in the crack. If there is no Kohen Gadol, right? One died and a new one hasn't been appointed yet, and that's when your trial happens. Sorry, then you go to banishment forever. Right? You're just in exile forever. Or if you're the one who killed the high priest, so that's why there is no high priest, you go into banishment forever. Or if you are a high priest, then and you kill, then you go into banishment forever. Right? Now, again, remember, all of these are only manslaughter cases, not murder cases. So it's not like someone running around with a knife deliberately killing. These are all accidental deaths.
Why, if you are a high priest and you accidentally kill someone, you need to be forever and not until the next one?
Nope. Because you were the high priest when it happened. You have to wait until you're dead before you go free.
Sense.
What happens if you are a past high priest?
If you're in the past categories we talked about, you still count as a Kohen Gadol. Yeah, if you're a retired Kohen Gadol,
yes,
you're still stuck.
So
Forever. So be careful, right? Don't accidentally kill someone if you're a Kohen Gadol. It's a long time. All right. Now, but what about part 2?
He, the manslayer, may not go out to bear witness, neither for cases having to do with a religious observance, nor to bear witness in a monetary suit, nor to bear witness in a capital case.
Right? So it's like, wow, if you are in this city, you are in this city. You don't get to go out even for a very, very good reason, right? Even though we need you as a witness. No. Can we move the court there? Yes, of course. We can go to get testimony and we can do the court trial there, but we're not allowed to bring him out of the city. He is really there forever, not even with an escort, right?
And what happens if the parents die? I need to sit there for Shiva.
You sit Shiva where you are. Well, the same thing happens, let's imagine that you're living in New York and your parents were in Poland, in 1920, and your parents die. You're not going to Poland to sit Shiva. You sit Shiva in New York. And that's been the way for most of our history. It's only nowadays with airplanes that people can fly for funerals. It used to be you'd get a telegram saying your parents are dead, and you'd start Shiva when you got the telegram. And you didn't fly back or you didn't get on a boat to go back to Poland. Okay. What's that?
He wants to know what is a telegram.
A telegram?
I probably know it, but I
So,
forgot it.
remember in the old days, the when they send the signals on the wires? Before telephones.
Oh, the big.
They used to
machine?
send, not a big machine, they used to send electric signals on wires, and they would have to like tap out in Morse code. You got to look at old movies.
First World War.
Actually, even before that, because by the First World War, they were just beginning to figure out, other ways like telephone.
Like
Civil War, all
yeah.
telegraph,
That big
yeah.
computer, right? It was called the big computer at that time.
Nope, there were no computers then.
And you were able to answer the phone.
Nope, this is before that.
Oh.
All long before
No
that.
phones.
No voice at all. It would just send the signal, and the signal would make a little thing tap, and you would write down 3 taps. That equals an S. 3 short taps is an S. 3 long taps is an O. I only remember SOS. So,
I have to see it.
all right. So look up telegraph.
Oh, what a victory.
Hmm?
Victory.
Oh yeah, dun 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 dun. Sorry, that's V is like Beethoven's Fifth. Anyway, that's right. Thank you. I remember that one too. So I can spell out any word as long as it has an S, an O, and a V. Not that helpful. Part A.
Rabbi Yost, the Galilean.
I think you skipped one. Part 2A.
Oh, okay. Even should all Israel meet him, and even a general like Yoav, the son of
Zeruiah.
Okay. He may never go out as it is said. To there he fled. There must be his abode, and there his death, and there his burial.
That's his abode. That's his house. There. That's also where he's going to die. And that's also where he's going to bury. Even if he is the most brilliant general ever, and we need him for the head of the army, nope, sorry, he is in exile. You do not get to leave even for that.
But then you go to him and ask him.
Including for Pikuach Nefesh.
Well, what the guy that had to be in a refuge city, like to the coin that all died, what he make his living out?
Well, not much. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, he wouldn't be a farmer, right? So he would have to do something else in the city. He'd have to hire himself out as some kind of worker. And it's not a great.
They wouldn't provide him with drinking waters and
Nope.
food, nothing.
Nope. You're in exile, right? This
But
is
they
not
can go
a.
to him, right?
This is not for retirement.
On vacation.
Yeah, but you can go to the person. Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm
And now
gonna-
we have laptops.
Right. All right. Part 3.
Part 3, just as the city affords asylum to, so does its Sabbath boundary afford asylum. Right? Did I say it right?
Yep. Asylum. So the Tehum, the distance outside the city that you can walk on Shabbat, that is considered to be part of the city. So from the city walls out 2,000 amot. 2,000 amot is like 3,000 feet. So, what is that? Like a mile, a little bit less than a mile. That's still considered part of the city. So you can go for a nice walk outside the city, but you can't go past where you could walk on Shabbat. Make sense?
So, do they have like a synagogue inside?
Oh yeah, the city would have its own synagogue, or more than one probably. Part 4.
Part 4, okay. If a manslayer went beyond the boundary of the city and the blood avenger found him.
So this is to go to your question of why not just escape? Well,
Rabbi Yost, the
Galilean
Galilean says, for the avenger is a matter of obligation to kill him. For everyone else, a matter of option.
All right. So what his opinion is, Yosef Hagalil, is that the avenger is obligated to kill him. So if I'm the family member of the guy who died, and I see you walking through Orlando, and I know you're not supposed to be in Orlando, I have to kill you. That's his opinion. But if I am the friend or a stranger to the guy who died, and I see you walking through Orlando, if I want to kill you, I can.
How close you need to be in blood in order to have an obligation?
You have to be within the immediate family.
Brother,
Yeah,
father,
exactly. Immediate,
son,
right.
really.
Right. But, I mean, look at what he's saying here, is that once you do this, you're fair game. Anybody who wants to kill you if you go out for, beyond the city, they can kill you if they want. That is pretty harsh. Rabbi Akiva, on the other hand,
Rabbi Akiva says, it is a matter of option for the avenger, and anyone else who kills him is not liable for it duty.
Right? So you are not actually obligated to kill him. If you are the blood avenger, you can choose not to kill him. You're allowed not to take vengeance. So that is a huge argument between them. Ultimately, Rabbi Akiva seems to win this one, but that is basically trying to say that other people shouldn't kill them. However, if someone else kills him, even though it was wrong, and they'll face punishment by God, they aren't actually murderers. So they don't receive the death penalty for having killed him. So it's a special subcategory of murder.
So the rest are not liable for him, meaning they cannot kill them.
It means you shouldn't kill him, but if you do kill him, you're not considered a murderer. So it's still easier to kill him than to kill just some other random person. But you'll still answer to God, but you won't answer to the court. Well, not by being executed. There'll be other things done to you, but not execution.
But so how do you get away from that and not get away with it from God?
What do you mean?
How do you get away from killing somebody
Right.
you see in man's eyes, but yet in God's eyes you don't get away with it?
Because there are certain punishments that God does not want us making the decision of how to handle.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of them. Right? So if somebody kills somebody who is technically already pre-dead,
Yeah.
because they have chosen to leave the city of refuge, it's like dead man walking. I technically may be the one who actually stopped his heart, but he was already dead the moment he left that city. And so therefore, I'm not 100% like a murderer, and that means the court can't treat me 100% like a murderer. They can treat me like someone who shouldn't have done this, but they can't actually execute me.
That's not how it is today.
Well, no. There's a lot of things that are different between this and today.
If a tree was standing with the boundary and its boughs extended beyond
The boughs, the branches,
boughs, sorry.
the branches.
Yeah, beyond, extended beyond the boundary, or if it was standing outside the boundary and it boughs.
Boughs.
Boughs? Oh,
Yep.
yeah, boughs. Yeah.
OUGH is one of the worst English combinations ever.
Boughs extended within it, woolly or wally.
Wholly, completely.
Yeah.
It wholly.
The position of boughs.
All right. So you got a tree, and here's my tree, and here's its branch, and this is the limit for the city. The tree is the tree is inside the city, and its branches extend out, and the guy is standing under the shade of the branches. He is still inside the city. Right? He is still okay. If the tree is outside and the branches go in, and he's under the branches, he is still okay. Right? Where the branches are, that is the zone that is covered. That make sense?
Yes. The rabbis are going as far as they can, make sure somebody doesn't.
To give him a cover, right?
Yeah.
Right. That the tree depends on where its roots are. The roots are, and the boughs extend its zone. Right. So if I'm one more time, just to make sure my hand doesn't work like that. So here's my space. Here's my tree. Right. So imagine the tree is inside, and the branches go out. That tree extends the zone. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But if the tree is out and the branches go in, that branches extend the out zone, and there would be like a little tiny part cut out that you shouldn't walk into if you want to stay safe. That make sense? Right? So the branches follow the trunk. Hopefully that's clear. Okay.
If he slew someone in that city of refuge, he is banished from one neighborhood to another neighborhood.
Go ahead and read part A.
And a Levite is banished from one city to another.
Okay. So This is just, covering the loopholes. What if I accidentally kill somebody and I'm already in a city of refuge? Where do I run? Right? I'm already here. You run to the next neighborhood. Right? Cities have districts. And if you're in District A, you run to District B. And now you have fulfilled the mitzvah of fleeing to the city.
So why you cannot run to a different city?
Because if you run to a different city, you're going to be exposed. They'll catch you.
Might catch you.
You're already in one,
Right?
and you need to run to a different one,
Right?
and they will catch you.
Because the blood avengers, the family,
But you can't do the same as the first time, that someone needs to be with you.
you can, but if the person decides that they don't want to listen to reason, they don't want to listen to the deputies that are with you, they could still kill you along the way. But if you're in the city, they can't.
But the deputy can protect you. Also by force, right?
No, not by force.
I know they don't.
No.
They didn't
No, remember we said they can argue, they can advocate. They're not police. They're not able to defend you. Right? They can defend you with words like a lawyer. They can't defend you with a sword. Yeah, well, because technically the blood avenger has the right. And this is one of the reasons why the Chachamim are interpreting this in order to give as much coverage as possible, right? To prevent that kind of blood murder going on and on and on. Because it would just keep perpetuating the hate and the anger in the community. And if you're a Levite, well, a Levite is already part of the city, right? Because remember, these cities were Levite cities. So he can't just move from neighborhood to neighborhood. He is the city. So he does have to go to a whole different city. He can't stay in the same zone. All right. Let's get 2:08 so we can definitely be done. Yerach, I think you're up.
Manslayer went to his city of his refuge, and the man of that city wished to do him honor, should refuse by saying to them, I'm a manslayer.
Right? So you go to a new city and they say, welcome to the city. We want to make you the president of the synagogue. He should say, I'm a manslaughterer, meaning I am not deserving, I'm not worthy of the honor. Make sense? Okay. However,
they say to him, nevertheless, he should accept from them the preferred honor, as it is said, and this is the word of the manslayer.
Right? So if they proffer you an honor, and you say no, and they say, we don't care, we want you to have the honor anyway, then he is allowed to take it. Right? He has to say no once. Why? Because it says this is the word of the manslayer, not the words of the manslayer. He has to say no once, but he doesn't have to say no twice. Make sense? All right. Part 2.
They used to pay rent to the Levites, according to the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir says they did not pay them rent.
All right, so this is the debate of, well, wait a minute. Do they have to pay or not pay to live in the city? Because this isn't their original home. And the cities, as we know, belong to the Levites.
But not because they don't have any income. How can they pay something if they don't have any income?
They can go into debt,
They will
right?
And they will finish in jail
No,
or as slaves.
exactly.
So
They'll become an
they
Evet.
finish and sell. They can go to a different city where they can sell them to a different city. So the avenger can catch them in a different city.
No. You still have to stay where you are as the manslayer. But the idea would be that they would hire themselves out for work, right? I mean, this is in San Francisco where the prices are going to be, ridiculous. You become a laborer, or you have some other skill that you can do.
I don't think so. No, because if
No, I know.
If you have limitations in the job that you can do, the income that you can produce, okay? They cannot force you when you are already in a very temporary situation, limited to pay rent like you are living here permanently,
Right.
as a normal person, because it's not a normal situation.
Of course not.
So it's an exception. So you need to make an exception for those people.
But this is like I said before, this is the falling between the cracks, right? Because we have people who murder, and we have people who don't murder. And then in the middle, we have people who kill accidentally. And then the rabbi said, yeah, and there's people who kill accidentally where it's a really pure accident. And they're just like people who didn't murder, right? So they're all over here. So we're left with a tiny little group of people who aren't murderers, but they did cause a death that really could have been avoided if they had taken a little bit more care. So how do we deal with them? Well, we can't execute them because they're not murderers, and we can't let them go because they are responsible for someone being dead.
They
So
should be punished somehow.
well, not
Punished.
it's not punished, but we have to.
Like an example, like driving.
Mhm.
You know, you accidentally get in a wreck, so God forbid, but accidentally kills a person.
Right.
So you're talking about those little cracks.
Well, especially if you not that your brakes suddenly stopped working, but you were texting, so you could have avoided it. But you also weren't trying to do it, and you weren't being, well, it depends on your state laws, criminally, liable, but there's that gray area. And so what does the Torah basically do? The Torah says we abstain. We're not saying yes, we're not saying no, we're saying meh, and that means we need to put them somewhere until we can hit the reset button, which is the death of the Kohen Gadol.
So the halacha goes by Rabbi Yehuda?
Yes, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir, when he speaks alone, always loses.
I agree with Rabbi Meir.
And that's why Rabbi Meir always loses. Because
Because I agree with him.
because Rabbi Meir was considered to be so brilliant that he could convince anybody of anything. And so therefore his arguments were too good.
No, because it's common, as I explained in my position previously, like it's an unusual situation that you cannot punish someone because sending them to, at the end they will finish as a slave.
They might, but their family can support them. The Kohen Gadol's family will support him.
If yes or no, moms, and maybe they say, oh, there's so many bad people, okay, that I cannot provide for everyone.
True. So that, is the difficulty. What this really brings to mind again is this notion of what is our feeling communally for a death, and what is our feeling communally for the person who caused the death, right? When somebody dies, the whole community should feel like we have been damaged, right? Not just the family, but everybody should feel like this is a part of our whole community that has been lost. And so too, the person who did the damage, even when it was accidental, but still could have been prevented, we should still consider them and care for them, right? We don't just throw them away. We don't, sell them into slavery. We don't execute them. We put them into this waiting period until the Kohen Gadol dies, and then life can kind of return.
It looks like the house.
That's not a bad example. Yes.
That's like a mitzvah too, what they do, right?
The house.
Like what?
It's like a mitzvah that they do it.
Right, a mitzvah, yes.
It's a mitzvah because it's on the Torah.
Well, it's definitely a mitzvah. I mean, that they have to do this. This is, but the question is, how do you do it, right? So there is both an element of punishment with the notion that what he did, there's definitely an element of wrongness to it, but there's also an element of protection, which is whatever he did, he doesn't deserve to be killed. Not by us and not by the family.
That's why I don't agree to, I don't agree to,
But that's
Mishnah 6.
but that's only if he leaves.
I know, but I still don't agree to it. Because I mean, it's like, how can you observe the Torah, be told in love Hashem, yet you're doing this out of revenge?
Well, Hashem is the one who tells.
So no. God says that it's okay to take vengeance in this very, very limited
I'm
case.
too afraid of Hashem to do that.
And that is what the rabbis want to be the ideal, that we don't go around taking vengeance on people like this, that we have trials, we allow justice to do what justice does, and we allow the Torah to be fulfilled in its fullness without any more additional bloodshed. The rabbis believed that murder was a crime against the entire nation, and accidental death was a crime and a suffering for the whole nation. Right? That's why when we talk about the egel arufa, the cow who we have to break the neck for the body that we find in the middle of the wilderness between two cities. Why do we have to do anything? Because even though that person wasn't known to us, maybe, or we don't know who killed them, and certainly I didn't do it, it's still on us that it happened in our community, in our nation. And therefore, we need to somehow make things right. That was one way of doing it, but there were other steps that the rabbis also make us do.
So if the person that went into the city and was caught by a family member or friend,
they're safe.
In the city,
if they're in the city,
they're out of the city.
If they're out of the city,
Yeah, that's what I mean. So what I'm saying is, so like, if they were to kill that person, would the whole city find out?
Well, I mean, you'd find out eventually because there'd be a body, and you would say, "I killed the person because I'm allowed to kill them." So personalize it from the blood avenger's point of view, right? Imagine that you're a parent. And imagine some guy was negligent in hauling up his barrels or lowering them down rather, and he killed your kid, right? And wouldn't you feel anger? Wouldn't you feel that you wanted this person dead?
And one of the, I think it was in the Torah or one of the books of the writings, one of the women got raped and the brothers came out and murdered
Dinah, yes, the story of Dinah. Yeah, I mean, so, and that is a very normal human reaction. What the Torah tries to do is say, yeah, but there's this refuge, and that's the ideal, is that we don't let the person just walk free because, maybe there was some responsibility here, but we also don't murder them. And what the rabbis were trying to do is further hem that in, but they're recognizing that this is both protection for the killer, but it's also somewhat of punishment for the person. Okay, one last sentence. Yerach, I think you were still reading.
3, yeah?
Yeah, 3.
And on his return home, he returns to the office he formerly held, according to the words of Rabbi Meir. But Yehuda says he does not return to the office he formerly held. All
right, so this is the question of
if he was a high priest.
Not a high priest, but if he just had he's an important, position. Right, he's a macher, right? He's important in the community. So somebody was, let's imagine somebody was on the city council, and they were out and they were, cutting trees with their chainsaw, and they were negligent, and they accidentally kill somebody. And so they go to the city of refuge, and they have to stay there. The high priest dies 5 years later, and they come back. Should they be given their position back on the city council?
They already paid the punishment.
Okay, so you're on Rabbi Meir's side.
Again.
Yeah, again.
We are buddies, okay?
Yeah. So Rabbi Meir says, yes, right? Whatever they did, whatever problem, it's been clean because the high priest is dead. They did what was supposed to be done. We had the trial. We're all good. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, right? There is still a stain upon them, right? How can we look to them in a position of power knowing that through them and through their negligence, a death happened? Right? How can we let them be in a position of authority in the community knowing that that's something they've done? Now, the Torah is fine with the idea of rehabilitation of criminals, but the question here isn't about rehabilitation. The question here is about re-elevation. Right? It's not about having the person be your business partner. That's perfectly fine. It's not about having the person be your neighbor. Yeah, let them be your neighbor. Don't be mean or things like that. It's not about hiring them to work in your company or to be, any other position in the community. It's about, are you going to put them back to a position of power? Are you going to return them to an office within the community? That means a position of authority in the community. And Rabbi Yehuda says no. And this is implicit in this is that whatever else, God allowed them to be the instrument of an unnatural death, and that means there is something about them that we should be hesitant to put in a place of position of authority above us, of status.
We see today a lot of compacts from politicians.
Oh, from politicians, absolutely.
Now, but we, the people, we decide, and I know that is something that we look carefully. Okay, yeah. Okay.
This wasn't a democracy. And why do so many politicians make comebacks? Not because they are repentant, not because they did tshuva, but because the people who elect them vote for the party, not for the person, or because they think that the justice was wrong. It's not usually because someone really honestly admits that they did something bad and that people really believe that what they did was wrong. When politicians around the world make comebacks, it's usually because of other reasons than their good heart.
Now, what happens if really someone really do tshuva? Say, you know what? The best way to learn is from your mistakes. You know what? Accidentally or under your guard, something happened. Well, I was so dumb. I got it. Will not happen. Now I'm wisely because everyone learns from it. Look, I did a lot of mistakes in my life.
Of course.
If I knew
did your mistakes
today,
did your mistakes kill anyone?
20 years ago, I would be a different person.
Did your mistakes kill anyone?
I don't know.
I think you'd remember.
Not.
I think you'd remember, right? So the question here again, we're only talking about position, but we're only talking about positions of authority, right? So there's another layer to this. So let's imagine that I was the mayor of the town, right? And I am, because back in the days, mayors still had to work. They didn't just get other people to do the work. So I am up on my roof, right? And I am using that heavy roller thing that we talked about way back at the beginning of the chapter. And I am sitting up there. I got my headphones on and I'm jamming along, rolling stuff on my roof. And I, boom, let go. It falls off the roof and it kills 5 kids.
Oh my God.
Okay? Exactly how are you going to look at me when I come back for re-election after returning from the position from the city of refuge, right? Plus, what does it say about my attitude of the people around me that I was involved in something that allowed something like that to happen? Let's do a modern example without a heavy roller, right? So let's imagine there's a politician, and there's a politician who drinks, and he drives, and he rams a school bus, right? Okay, you know what? He didn't want to kill all those kids, right? And he does tshuva, and he goes to AA, and he stops drinking, and he's never going to do that ever again. Yeah, but what was his attitude about carefulness of the community around him when he did this? Is that something we can really trust in a position of authority and power? Not talking about whether he's my neighbor and he's rehabilitated. Not talking about whether he works for me in my business or works as my partner in business. That's fine.
Maybe he grew more as a person, actually.
Good.
Actually,
you can grow as a person without being in power over me.
How many generals did mistakes and they give them a second opportunity? Look, Napoleon was one.
Yeah, that didn't work out so well.
You're teaching
but the commander in chief.
He came back and re-invaded Europe.
The commander in chief of Israel, okay?
Which one?
The last one. They did a terrible mistake in the last Lebanon war, but terrible, lack of leadership. But they were general. They saw the mistake. Hopefully, they learned the mistakes, and after they learned the mistake, and they started to act after were elected in a different way, learning from their past mistakes. So be sure that they didn't do again the same mistake. And a lot of people were killed, okay, died for their mistake. So I understand about your position, but sometimes when you do a really tshuva, you grow as a person.
Absolutely.
You're more mature and more wise.
I mean, the sages.
If you're going to put that person back, you're letting other politicians to say, "Oh, I can do the same mistake and get away with it," even though like it's in the back of your head, that back of your conscience, not thinking out loud, but so you don't want the same mistake and repetition to happen. So it's like, okay, you did it, we forgive you by accident.
Right, so I agree, right. With your basic position, the Talmud is absolutely in agreement that a person who sins and does tshuva stands in a place that a person who never sinned can never stand. right? That somebody who actually does a mistake and fixes their mistake, they grow in a way that the people who avoid mistakes can never experience. Now, that doesn't mean you should go out and make mistakes on purpose, right? That's not the answer, right? There is definitely room for growth of the person, but this is not, I'm going to be a little controversial here, right? Judaism is not only concerned about the needs of the individual. Right? Judaism is not a hyper-individualistic faith and community rule set. Judaism cares about the needs of the community as much as the needs of the individual. And just because you've grown and you're a better person for it, and you've turned over a new leaf, and you don't think it's fair, doesn't mean the rest of the community doesn't want to see your smiling face after what you caused. It's great that you've done tshuva, right? Same thing happens in modern American situations with sex offenders, right? It's great that they do tshuva, right? Somebody who did something horrible to another adult, or God forbid a child, yes, at some point they're released from prison. At some point they have hopefully done tshuva and recognized that what they did was wrong and evil and terrible. That doesn't mean I want them to be a teacher. Right? That doesn't mean that I want them to run for public office. Right? I mean, can you imagine somebody who had served their time, had been rehabilitated as a sex offender, and now they're running for office, and I'm the parent of the kid that guy, abused, and they're smiling up on the screen saying, vote for me, and they get elected? I mean, yes, in America, it's allowed. I don't think it would happen, but it wouldn't happen for precisely this reason, right? Because even though the law says technically you can run for president of the United States as long as you have served your time, that doesn't mean that anyone's going to want you to be the leader after what you did. Even if you're a better person, even if you have grown beyond anyone else's understanding and now could be the best leader ever because of your growth, we're not ready to follow.
I understand the position, yeah. Right? What they say that, as you said in previous cases, the little cases in between. Okay, what happened to those cases that you do tshuva and you can bring back to the community? Okay, not about you individually. Oh, right. I grow as a person.
Your wisdom.
You grow as a person, but your wisdom, you can help the community to grow out, to move on, because now you see different. I don't know. Like, I don't know. We speak a very bad example, but just
no. So it's a good hypothetical.
House, okay, right. You were in charge of building a house. The house fell apart. You saw the mistake.
Right.
Someone died. You saw the mistake that's not the way to construct. So now you want to really be right. in the same position, but now you know for the community how is the best right. way to build more safe for everyone else.
Right, because you used to be the safety inspector, but yes. you were found to take bribes, and the bribes that you took meant that the buildings weren't safe and people died. Right? So now...
You're not negative for just a few days before shut up.
No. So now,
okay.
you come back and you really understand, better than anyone else, the danger of bribes. You know how the system works. You know what kind of corruption there is. And you know you would never do that again. It's not about you. Right? And no offense, but we don't believe that wisdom is only found in one person. So yes, maybe your wisdom would be good. And maybe it would help the community, but that doesn't mean we can't get the wisdom from someone else who doesn't have that same problem. Remember what it said about Yoav. Even if we need you to lead the army, sorry, you're in the city now. And you can lead the army remotely. You know, we'll hook you up with some good internet. But no, that we are not going to claim that any one person is so important that we can overlook whatever it is they did to allow them to continue what might even be good for all of us. Right? Down that path is how people end up re-electing politicians who were blatantly corrupt, punished by the system, and then released after serving their time. And they'll re-elect them, and they will be corrupt again, and they'll go back into jail. And when they come out, they'll get re-elected again by the same people, because those people are willing to overlook their crimes because they believe that what they'll do for the community is more important. And this is trying to say, we don't do that. Right? For people who are leaders, we have a higher standard. And no one leader is so important that they get to occupy that position regardless of their past.
So, Rabbi, it's like an example with the Book of Moses. With Miriam, she was a prophet, and she all of a sudden,
And she
when
did
they
it.
went to the land of Egypt, leaving the land
Right.
of Egypt, and then she started Lashon Hara, gossiping
Right.
about Moses
Right.
to Aaron. So Hashem brought everybody to the tent and
Yep.
reprimanded
And
her, and then he threw her out for 7 days, and I don't think he ever let her come back as a prophet, but she could come in.
well, we don't see any examples of her acting as a prophet, but she was definitely allowed back in.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
was allowed back in to move on, but she couldn't be a prophet ever again, right?
Right.
Because of the Lashon Hara gossip.
So this is, like I said, where we hit a very hard overlap of so many different conflicting feelings, right? We want to rehabilitate the individual. We want to restore them to their place in community when they've done tshuva. As Natan said, that's all that these times of tshuva, of Elul and Tishrei are all about, is that potential. But that is the potential of the individual, which the individual should pursue. The community is allowed to say, great, I'm glad that you're rehabilitated. I'm glad you've done tshuva. I'm glad you're back with us. But we don't want your face on the poster. The community is allowed to say that. And that's hard, because that is hard for the left-leaning part of our society that wants to make everybody happy and good and restored again. And it's hard for those parts of society that say, hey, if he's my choice, I want to vote for him, even if the guy is a scoundrel. And it's hard for the individual to realize that sometimes there are certain mistakes that you make that you can't walk back and be in the same place again.
Maybe you take the incentive for the person to real tshuva. You say, you know what? No matter what you do, no matter how much you really sow, still you have your stigma.
Only for this. Only for this. And if doing tshuva is dependent on regaining your glory, on regaining your position, then that's not real tshuva. Then you're only doing tshuva because you dislike the consequence, not because you admit that what you did was wrong. Right? If you only say, I'm sorry, so that you can regain your status, then you didn't actually say you were sorry. Not for the deed. You said, I'm sorry that I'm being punished. I want my punishment to stop, not I want my behavior to change. And so if you incentivize tshuva by putting the person back in their position, then you're actually stripping tshuva of its power. But I mean, you're right. This is harsh, and this is hard, and this could indeed discourage some people. But the community is allowed to choose who it wants to honor and who it wants to have in positions of authority and leadership. Again, this isn't talking about them being your neighbor. This isn't talking about having them over for dinner. Right? This is only for positions where they are officers, where they have authority in the community, and that we get to have the final word on. And that doesn't always feel fair, But sometimes some people, even if what they did has been rehabilitated and restored, even if they seem to be a new person, that doesn't mean the community is ready to accept them in that position. It's hard. I mean, and it shouldn't be easy. We should be left feeling uncomfortable with this, because this is that weird gap zone between people who murdered knowingly, intentionally, and we know how to feel about that, and people who did it completely by accident or didn't at all, and we know how to feel about that. This is, I'm ambivalent. I'm ambiguous when dealing with this.
So, Rabbi, what about King David?
What about him?
He had Bathsheba's husband murdered, and he still stayed in power as a king.
So there's two answers. One is the traditional answer, which is to say he didn't actually do anything officially, technically wrong. Right? You have to work that through. It's complicated. It has to do with Uriah having given her a get conditionally before he left. And so when he did not come back, the get was retroactively valid, which meant that she wasn't married at the time that they were together. So therefore, it wasn't considered adultery. Plus, Uriah refused to do what the king had said, which in itself is a criminal offense that is punishable by death. So you can flip that entire story around and end up with Uriah deserved what he got. Or you can look at it and say, kings aren't us. And King David was absolutely horrifically reprimanded by the prophet Natan. and I don't know how much I want to go down this particular line, and did suffer greatly for his crime with the loss of his child.
Yeah.
And well, because I mean, the other children as well. I mean, there were so many other problems, but the first child, the one who died from that original relationship, because many people are uncomfortable with the idea that the death of a child is partly connected to the actions of the parent. But that is a much, much longer and deeper conversation than we have time for tonight. So we will call it there, which means we didn't get to chapter 3, but we're all ready to go first Wednesday of October, whatever number that happens to be.
Oh, I got a question.
Yes, let me just hit stop here. And